exactly. Yeah.
And did you know when you left Turner College, that's what you wanted to do, is drive?
I knew from the time I was 12 years of age
Yes.
that I was going to be a professional racing driver.
And how did that come about? You went to Mundellas, and what triggered that?
No. So my dad had a grocery shop in Wickham Park in Dundrum. I'm walking home from school one day and I see a British registered truck outside the house of one of the customers that bought her groceries from my dad. It had Sydney Taylor Racing written on it.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, I wonder, is that a racing car in there? Go to my dad, tell him the truck is there. He said, yes, at 7:00 tonight. You can see the car that's in there. We go back there, open the doors. Here's a beautiful white Brabham BT8 racing car with an Irish shamrock on the front of it. And my dad said, I'll take you to Dunboyne to see it race tomorrow. He drives me out there. And now this is fairly basic. Back in those days, there was no safety fences. You could literally sit on the grass bank as the cars are whizzing by. My dad took me there. I remember the noise, the smell, the sound, the speed, everything, like a 3D video in my mind. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a professional racing driver. Now, I have to tell you, I was so naive. Having to get a job didn't factor into it because if I had a job, it would take way too much time out of my day.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do that. And that's how naive I was. I was going to be a racing driver. Now, remember, we didn't even have a racing circuit in Ireland at the time.
Yeah.
And from then on, I was always fascinated with cars anyway, a normal boy, cars everywhere. But from then on, having been exposed to it, every day I would scheme and dream of the day that maybe I could drive a racing car. And then when I was 16, I had a Yamaha 50 motorbike. And I see this poster on a wall that said stock car racing in Santry Stadium. I go out and here's these bangers crashing and racing and doing all sorts of stuff. And I thought, I have to do that. And at 16, I bought an old banger and started racing in Santry at 16. My dad would tow me on a rope across the city out to Santry. Yeah. And that's when I started. And it was just, because I don't know whether I would say it was naive. I didn't really know what I was doing. I did. I was starting my racing career. So I was still in Turner College at the time. I had a group of friends there who were amazed that I was even racing.
Yeah.
And most people didn't have a driving license, but I was a step ahead because I was mission focused. I was doing it, and of course, every single day after school, I was working on my car. So that that takes away your social life. Most people are out, having a good time and having a drink and whatever they're doing. And I was stuck under a car working away. But I didn't know that was a selfish focus at the time. That was just what I had to do to get to the next race, to keep trying to climb the ladder.
And this seemed natural to you. Because that's all you knew, that's all you wanted. You can't measure any other way. And that's a drive that's got you started.
Yeah. And so, when I was 19, you're 3 years into stock car racing, I realized that's not going to go anywhere. And at that stage, they just built a track called Mondello in 1968.
Was 68,
so well, I have to get a racing car. I have to buy a Formula Ford, which was the, basic low rung of the ladder. And so the only way, I had to come up with a chunk of cash. I had to make £5,000 somehow. Yeah. Then the only way, there were two options to do it. I could become a labourer in the iron ore mines of Australia, or I could go to the Alaskan oil pipeline that was starting at that time. And so myself and a friend of mine said, we're doing one of them. This wasn't something we planned. We heard about it. Let's do it. Wow. Off we went. And so the reason we went to Australia was to go to Alaska, they charge you £1,000 for clothing to keep you warm so you didn't die in the frigid temperatures.
Yeah.
In Australia, you cut the sleeves off your shirt and the legs off your pants and you were well dressed.
Yeah.
That was it right there.
It hasn't changed.
Off we went. 3 weeks later, we were in Paris.
How old then? 19, were you?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it was
That's
1970.
incredible vision. When I think back when I was 19, I was barely struggling UCD to get, get up in the mornings.
Well, see, I couldn't go to UCD.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the ability to study at that level.
Yeah.
But it was never even an option.
Yeah.
Like, it was never discussed. You're going to miss out on college. That was never even an
thing.
option.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we heard about Australia, went down there. We were going to do 6 months of a winter stint. We're literally just laborers. We had a shovel, and you were digging iron ore that spilled over the conveyor belts.
Mm.
And I tell people it was the hottest, hardest, dirtiest, most enjoyable thing I'd done in my life up until that time.
Mm.
And so we arrived back in Ireland with £5,000, which is $10,000 in those days. Bought a Formula Ford, and then the rocket ship started to take off. Yeah, it was just an amazing.
And do you need super license in those for Formula Ford? Do your normal license enough? Didn't you have to? No, that was simple.
You just go in and pay £10 or £15. They were glad to get your money with the license and turn you loose and saying that was it. Now remember, there was no racing schools back in those days. Now there's racing schools, and people start racing at 4 and 5 and 6 years of age. We were thrown in at the deep end. You had to learn and develop your skills while you're in the car. So, I mean, that was a tough
And you were the mechanic as well, were you?
Oh, everything, yeah. And you were swapping tires because one got a bit worn. You couldn't afford to buy another one, so you swapped it and put it on the inside, put the one that's less worn on the outside. You did all the tricks.
It was real racing in those days, Derek. Now it looks a bit easy, doesn't it? Your blue tires, your yellow spots, your wet tires, your slicks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In those days, there was tires, one set of tires, and that was it.
Yeah, the model is definitely different these days, but it's still possible.
Yeah.
I believe with selfish focus to get further than most people would. But anyway, so the rocket ship took off, and it was just the most amazing.
And how did the F1 chance come along then? Because, there's a few of you kicking around that time, wasn't it? It was David Candy, Eddie Jordan, Bern Devaney. Yeah. Was Coleman Candy around? Oh, Candy, what's his name? Was he there then?
Vivian Candy.
Candy, yeah.
So it was an amazing set of circumstances how I made it to Formula One. I win the Irish Formula Ford Championship in 1975.
Yeah.
So I decided, we had to go to England, because England really was the home of professional racing. That's where you cut the mustard over there, and you're pretty good anywhere.
Yeah.
But we had to measure ourselves over there. So after I won the championship in Ireland, I owned a championship winning car. That was a value. That was an asset. Yeah. I could sell that, and I would sell it for £5,000. Now that £5,000 at the end of 1975 could be spent in 1976. I could either spend it on living expenses or racing expenses, but I couldn't do the two at the same time.
Yeah.
So the only way I could live cheaply was I bought an old bus, and my mother made the curtains. My dad made a mattress. A friend of ours made a sliding door in the middle of it. And that's when I left home to go to England in 76. I borrowed a car in England and went on and won 23 races there. So the next year, the next big move is to Formula 3.
Yeah.
When you go from Formula Ford to Formula 3, that was big time stuff. That was international racing. You can now race in England, and you could race across the continent. So you could go to Formula 1 support races and try and, do your stuff and see if there's anybody recognize you.
Yeah.
At the Formula 3, race in Austria, the Austrian Grand Prix.
Yeah.
We go there. I qualify on the pole beside Nelson Piquet. You remember what happened to be I won a world champion.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on the...
He's Verstappen's father, though, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Never thought of that. Yeah, he is, yeah. Anyway, sitting on the grid, strapped in, ready to go out to battle against Nelson Piquet and the rest. And this older guy with a sort of a limp and a shuffle comes across the front of my car, goes over to my sponsor, Derek McMahon, a big fella from Donegal, who were sponsoring me in Formula 3. He leaned up and he said something to him, and then he walked off. Well, big Derek McMahon comes over, sticks his head in the cockpit, says to me, that fella there said, if you win this race, he'll put you into a Formula 1 car by the end of the year. I said to him,